Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring today's most pressing issues across the globe. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. As political turmoil continues to shake South Korea, U.S. public opinion and the Biden administration's stance on the crisis are coming into sharper focus. With President Yoon Suk Yeol's declaration of a short-lived martial law and a failed impeachment vote, questions arise about the stability of South Korea's government and its potential impact on the critical Seoul-Washington alliance. While Washington reaffirms its commitment to the alliance, it has openly criticized Yoon's actions as a serious misjudgment, raising concerns about the future of bilateral relations, especially ahead of Trump's January inauguration. And as both nations navigate a complex diplomatic landscape marked by South Korea's domestic instability and rising tensions with North Korea, many wonder at this point whether the current crisis will hinder future high-level summits and U.S. South Korea negotiations on regional security and denuclearization. For a deeper discussion on this, we are joined by Choi Hyun-jin, Associate Professor at Kyunghee University's Department of Political Science. Welcome, Professor.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And also joining us from Washington is our Voice of America correspondent, Jessica Stone. Great to see you again, Jessica.
Good to be with you.
So let's start our discussion with Jessica. So how does the U.S. public view the current internal situation here in South Korea, including, President Yoon Suk Yeol's declaration of martial law and his current impeachment crisis?
Well, VOA interviewed a congresswoman about this very topic recently. Congresswoman Maryland Strickland of Washington State says that she's surprised at Yoon's move. She said democracy, though, worked because of the way that the government reacted with the impeachment proceedings. And there's also a comment we received from Human Rights Watch, which called the declaration a direct assault on democracy, but that the government response shows the strength of the South Korean democracy. And yet South Korea, he said, cannot afford to break this period of democracy, which it has had for decades.
Right, it was a shocking incident indeed for every one of us. Now, Professor Che, the U.S. government stated that the South Korea-U.S. alliance still remains strong, but in a rare move, it criticized Yoon's martial law announcement as a serious misjudgment. Do you think the martial law crisis will have any impact on Seoul-Washington's alliance?
Yes, the U.S. government called President Yoon's declaration of martial law as a serious mistake. And also, they said President Yoon badly misjudged it. So this is a rare criticism from a close ally. But at the same time, the U.S. reaffirmed the strong relationship between the two countries. This shows the challenge of maintaining good partnership during political trouble in one of the allies. So I think that while the alliance remains strong in military and economic cooperation, this internal crisis in South Korea could create short-term difficulties, especially in security affairs. So if South Korean political problem worsen in the near future, it could make security cooperation between the two countries more difficult. For example, we have a plan to transfer wartime operational control to South Korea, and also there are joint efforts to respond to North Korean threat, such as through the nuclear consultation group. And I think this kind of initiative could face some delays. So these initiatives are very important for the military readiness of both countries. But continuing domestic issues in South Korea could slow or disrupt this plan. So I believe that both countries will need to work carefully to protect their alliance and also shared goals.
Right, and after this first failed impeachment vote attempt against President Yoon and the continued political instability in South Korea, the U.S. State Department said that legal and political procedures should proceed consistently according to the rule of law. Professor, what do they want to say by this?
So I believe that this statement from the U.S. State Department highlight the importance of a democracy and also following South Korea's laws and constitution. And it shows that the U.S. wants political issues like impeachment or investigation to be handled fairly and legally without undermining democratic values of South Korea. And also, I think the U.S. is also concerned about the possibility of violence during this crisis. And I hope and I believe there will be no violence in protest in the near future. And at the same time, the U.S. is careful not to interfere in South Korea's domestic politics. So, however, by making this kind of a statement, it reminds both the government and opposition of South Korea to act responsibly and also peacefully, because stability in South Korea is especially important for dealing with the regional challenges such as North Korea and also countering the rise of China. And I believe the U.S. hopes South Korea can resolve these issues peacefully and legally and maintain its democratic values.
Right. And now to Jessica. On January 20th next year, Donald Trump will be inaugurated as the president of the U.S. Historically, the first summit between the U.S. and South Korean leaders have occurred within months of the new U.S. president taking office. But with the current situation, the timing of any summit seems quite uncertain. Have there any statements? Were there any statements from Trump's transition team regarding this?
No, there haven't been. In fact, the last foreign policy related tweet or Truth Social from incoming President Trump is really about the situation in Syria. Almost everything he is talking about on social media now are the announcements of the people he's appointed to or nominated to be part of his incoming administration. But in terms of the timing of a potential summit, Trump's first summit with President Moon didn't happen until June 2017. And you may remember Moon was elected May 9th. So we have had a pattern in the last couple of transitions between U.S. governments and Seoul governments that a new president has to be elected on one side or the other before a meeting takes place. And certainly there's no precedent for a sitting U.S. president to take a meeting from someone who's not the leader of the other country. If Yoon does step down, which seems increasingly likely, or that he will be impeached, the proceedings and the travel ban will keep him from leaving the country anyway. So I wouldn't think that we would see a meeting on U.S. soil anytime soon.
Right. We'll touch upon the impeachment of our president as we speak. Now, President Trump has been preferring top-down negotiations, and given that South Korea's diplomatic leadership is currently effectively stalled, there are concerns about missing the right time for negotiations. Professor Che, how do you view this situation?
Yes, it is true that President-elect Donald Trump prefers direct and top-down negotiation. And this kind of negotiation requires strong and also stable leadership on both sides. However, the South Korean current political instability is a major challenge. So if the South Korean government cannot focus on diplomacy, unfortunately, there's a risk of missing the golden time to deal with the important issues between the two countries. And I'm worrying about this situation for two reasons. The first, the Trump style of a negotiation requires a quick decision and also clear communication between the two countries. But if South Korean leadership is somehow distracted by internal problems, so it may not respond effectively to Trump's proposal or push its own goal. And this could leave South Korea at a disadvantage in setting priorities for the U.S.-Korean partnership. And secondly, without stable leadership, the South Korea may lose its ability to lead regional strategies, such as managing threats from North Korean nuclear program or dealing with China's growing influence. So to avoid this, I think South Korea needs to resolve its political crisis as quickly as possible. So whether through impeachment, resignation, or another peaceful solution, the stabilizing the government is essential at this time.
Right, so we need to settle down as soon as possible. Now, Jessica, as you've mentioned a while ago about the impeachment, when Trump took office in January 2017, South Korea was in the middle of an impeachment crisis of President Park Geun-hye. And at that time, Trump expressed his stance of not dealing with a quote, dead power. Now, this means that a meeting with Prime Minister Han Duck-soo is quite unlikely, right? What's the general perspective?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've had several conversations with people either close to the administration or closely analyzing the situation, and no one expects a meeting between the incoming president, Donald Trump, once he takes office, and someone who is not the leader of the other country, in particular South Korea, because we have seen that things do need to settle down, right, on either one side or the other. And certainly the U.S. has had its own amount of political turmoil to deal with. But no, that because this is also a president, as you've alluded to, meaning U.S. President Donald Trump, that wants direct negotiations with someone who can make things happen. And he knows that somebody who is not in charge of the country or who's only temporarily in charge of the country cannot do that.
Right. So we'll have to wait until the government affairs get settled down. Now, Professor Che, what are the urgent issues that need to be discussed when the leaders of South Korea and the U.S. meet?
Yeah, there are several important issues that both countries need to discuss as soon as possible. And of course, one of the biggest concerns is North Korea's nuclear program. Both countries need to work together on ways to prevent further threat from North Korea and also enforce economic sanction and decide on possible diplomatic actions towards North Korea. Strengthening their plans for extended deterrence, especially through the nuclear consultation group, is also very important. Another key topic is how to manage China's rising influence in the region. The US and South Korea, they need to agree on strategies to deal with China's economic and also military activities in the Indo-Pacific region, while also protecting South Korea's security and economic interests. And lastly, economic cooperation is another important area. The South Korea and the United States need to strengthen their partnership in trade, the secure global supply chain, and to work together on advanced technology like semiconductor and artificial intelligence. And once again, I believe that resolving South Korea's political situation quickly will be essential for dealing with these issues.
Right, of course. Now, there are reports that the U.S. is considering direct talks regarding North Korea, raising concerns in South Korea about being sidelined due to the current domestic turmoil. Professor Che, how do you view the situation, and what kind of impact might direct U.S. Pyongyang talks have on South Korea's North Korean policy, particularly on denuclearization?
Yes, the U.S. considering direct talk with North Korea is happening, unfortunately, at this very difficult time for South Korea. So if these talks move forward without South Korea, it could raise some concerns about being left out of important decisions that directly affect South Korean security and interests. So direct talk between the U.S. and North Korea might also create problems for denuclearization of North Korea. So I'm worrying about this situation because U.S. might aim for some quick results, such as temporary freeze on North Korea's missile tests, while South Korea may prefer a more detailed plan that includes clear steps towards a full and complete denuclearization of North Korea. And there is also a worst case scenario. I hope this would not happen. But this worst case scenario is if the US compromises at the level of North Korea giving up only its ICBM while agreeing to lift the economic sanctions. And this scenario would seriously undermine South Korean security and weaken its position in future negotiation with North Korea. And I believe that such an outcome must be avoided. So to avoid this risk, we need a strong and stable South Korean government that can remind the United States that the cooperation between the two countries is essential for lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula.
All right, then, Professor, I must ask about the temporary freeze. Do you think the U.S. will be contented with, just a temporary freeze of provocations and just the giving up of ICBMs?
Are you asking me?
Professor Che? Yes?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So, yeah. So, I hope this would not happen. But, this is a really the worst case scenario. But based on this, Donald Trump's negotiation style, and also Donald Trump mentioned that if he's re-elected, he would go to Pyongyang and meet with Kim Jong-un. So, you know, I think many experts worry about this possibility that the U.S. might agree with Kim Jong-un for the temporary freeze or giving up only North Korean ICBM and agree to lift the economic sanction. But South Korea must remind the United States and Washington that we need a complete denuclearization of North Korea.
Right, so let's hope that would be the worst case scenario. Now, back to Jessica. Analysts predict that Trump's second term foreign policy would be more hardline than his first term. What kind of issues do you expect the U.S. to raise with South Korea?
Well, they're going to go back and raise the issue of the troop level at the DMZ for sure. The 28,000 troops will need to be either rejustified or readjusted by the South Koreans in this incoming administration, or the Koreans will be asked to pay even more than they're already paying. And I understand that they have already moved up their financial commitments to support those troops. But the argument's going to be made from the U.S. side that those troops would be better replaced in other parts of the theater, in particular to counter China, whether it's the Philippines or Guam or Palau. There are other perhaps better uses for pre-staging these troops in the event of a China contingency. Follow up on deterrence with China in terms of the trilateral alliance between Japan and South Korea. I think that's going to be another focus or for the incoming administration. What are the changes in government in Seoul that we're seeing right now, and the recent changes in government in Japan mean to the strength of the alliance? Are the incoming parties in line with the hawkish stance of the Trump administration when it comes to China and really trying to leverage the situation and make them back down? Perception here in Washington is certainly that the new party in Japan and the Democratic Party in Seoul, which could take over if there is a snap election later this year, or even a new election, I should say in 2025, that both of those parties are more pro-Beijing and will have a harder time aligning with the incoming administration when it comes to countering China.
Right, so everything would depend on how the situation unfolds in South Korea. Now, in order to maintain the South Korea-U.S. alliance and effectively engage with the Trump administration in his second term, what kind of diplomatic efforts will the South Korean government need to make, especially given the current domestic turmoil, Professor Che?
To work well with the second Trump administration, I believe South Korea needs to focus on key diplomatic efforts. On North Korea, South Korea needs to align its policy with the United States while ensuring its own priorities. And try this another area that needs careful attention. The South Korea should prepare for possible U.S. demands to renegotiate trade terms or universal tariffs on South Korean products. As well as actually, so many countries are worrying about these universal tariffs on their goods. So I think we must be prepared for very tough trade negotiation to ensure that any agreements with the United States remain fair and balanced. And lastly, the growing tension between the U.S. and China also require careful handling. The South Korea must work with the United States on regional security strategies while protecting its own economic interests with China. And I believe the balanced approach will be key to meeting both U.S. expectation and also South Korea's strategic needs.
Right, so tariffs and U.S.-China tensions. We'll keep that in mind. We'll have to leave our discussion right here. Many thanks to Professor Che and Jessica. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.